Moshe, are we on? Good morning. We begin by thanking the Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Teves, Yoel and Sara Kelman, in honor of the birth of the daughter, Oriya Tahel, and in the hope that all couples praying for children will soon have their tefilos answered. Amen. Kadosh Baruch Hu should send the Yeshua Bimheira. We also thank Teri Czinn in honor of their grandchildren, Adin, Tzvi, and Naftali Moshe. You should have a lot of nachas from them and from all of your children, from all of your grandchildren. And Moshe and Ellen Gavant in honor of Rabbis Richter and Kovacs. For doing a wonderful job delivering the Daf Yomi, Shurim while the Rabbis in Israel. Thank you so much. Bennett? Yeah. And Bennett Goldberg. Thank you, Bennett Goldberg, in commemoration of the yahrzeit of his father, Leonard Goldberg, Avram Leib ben Asher Pinchas, as well as Brian Gold. Thank you, Brian and Karen Gold, for a refuah for Shira Chana Bas Chaya Osna. She should be zeichet to a refuah shlema in Herav Yamin. Okay. Today's daf is daf Chaf Hey. We are going to be picking up 2 lines from the bottom. For those who were here yesterday, we did run out of time at the end of the shir. I recorded the last piece of the Gemara, so if you didn't hear it yet, it is recorded. It was posted on the WhatsApp group as well. I believe it's on the website, so you can catch up with that. Hopefully, you did it by now. So 3 lines from the bottom. Amar Rav Yehuda Amarav. Yehuda Amarav says, "B'chol yom v'yom, every single day, baskol yotzeis, a baskol goes out, v'yomeres, and it says, a heavenly voice comes out, and it says, Kol olam kulo nizon b'shvil chanina b'ni. The entire world is supported because of the zechusim, of the merits, of the mitzvos of Chanina b'ni, of Chanina ben Dosa, Chanina b'ni, and my son Chanina. The entire world is supported through his zechuyos, through his zechusim. However, he himself, dayo bekav charuvim may erev Shabbos the erev Shabbos. He had 1 kav of carob of bakster from erev Shabbos to erev Shabbos. He really was very simple. He needed almost nothing. So the entire world was supported through him. The Ben Yoda explains that sometimes there are things which get in the way of our shefa, of our bracha, which comes from Kadosh Baruch Hu. In other words, even if technically we are deserving of being supported, sometimes some of our actions kind of serve as blockages. So when a Kadosh Baruch Hu brings our parnasa, our sustenance, through a Talmud Chacham, through a tzaddik, like Chanina ben Dosa, it opens up a very wide path for it to go through there. So all of the parnasa, the entire world, was supported through him, kind of went straight through him. So there should not be anything filtering out any of the parnasa, any of the sustenance, but he himself only took a tiny sliver of it. Had he taken more, the world would have gotten less. So it's a tremendous chesed that he did for Klal Yisrael, for everybody, that he only took a tiny little bit, so he left so much more for the rest of the world to be supported from. Gemara says, "Havirigilo devisu lemichma tanur kol marli deshabta b'shadya akarta yishum kisufa." Every hour of Shabbos, she would turn on her oven and she would make believe she was baking bread. In other words, she would put something in the oven to make it smoke, to make the smoke come out, to give the impression as if she was baking challah. Because she was so poor. She literally didn't have any bread. She had no flour. She was not able to make the challah, and therefore she had nothing to put in the oven, but she was embarrassed. She didn't want everybody else to be baking challah, and she's not baking challah, and therefore she would put something in the oven just to make it smoky. It happens to be the Magen Avram, in the beginning of Hilchos Shabbos, quotes this Gemara as one of the sources that there's a mitzvah to bake challah on Erev Shabbos. There's a number of different reasons why the Ramah says, noagin lalosh, that there's a minhag to knead bread. But one of them is specifically that for Erev Shabbos, it's an appropriate thing for someone to bake bread and not to buy it from the baker. So we clearly see that was the minhag over here. So she was embarrassed. She was the only one who didn't have enough money to bake her own bread. So therefore, she would put something in the oven to make it smoke, to give the impression as if she's baking bread. Now, Shavivta, she had this neighbor, Bishta, who had a very bad personality. In other words, everyone's got somebody, right? She had this neighbor here who was not a good person. In Amra, she said, "Mechtiya dana deleslahu." I know these people have no money. V'loimidi, they have absolutely nothing. Mechtiya dana deleslahu v'loimidi. These people don't have any money. My kuli hai. What's all the smoke coming from the oven? I know for sure there's no bread there. They're so poor, it's impossible she's baking bread. So Azla, she felt it was important. It was her business to go check this out. Azla v'tarfa abava. Akispa, ba'ayla indura is avid lanisa techazid l'tanura mali lachma, ba'agna mali lisha. So she went in, she knocked on the door, she walked all the way into the house, she went to go check out the oven, and she noticed in the oven was tons of bread. In other words, she had never put any bread into the oven, and there was nothing there besides some substance that she added to make it smoke. And when her neighbor came barging into the house to go check what was going on, all of a sudden she sees that there's a whole bowl filled with dough, and there's a whole oven filled with bread. So Amrullah, she says to her neighbor, in other words, the neighbor who came into the house to go check what's going on, she said, Palnisa, Palnisa. In other words, Mrs. Chanina Bendosa, I see masa de kacharach lachma. Quickly get a masa, which was, again, the way they baked bread was they used to slap the bread against the wall of the oven, kind of like a pita or a lafa. So she told her to get whatever this tool is called. The Gemara generally calls it a mirdas, but whatever tool it was that they used to get this bread off of the wall, quickly get it because it's going to get burnt. So Amrullah, Mrs. Chanina Bendosa, I don't know what her name was, but whatever her name was, she said back to this lady, An afana lahachi aili. She just quickly blurted out, yeah, of course, that's where I went. While you came in to check, I quickly went to go get this. And Tana, the Gemara says, indeed, it wasn't just that she was saying that, Af hilahavi mirda nichtasa, she actually did go to get this tool, to get the dough off the bread, she was accustomed to always seeing nisim. In other words, Chanina Bendosa was somebody whose life was filled with nisim, so she knew as soon as this person walked in that if she was concerned about her dignity, she was concerned that she'd be embarrassed, and she was concerned that someone's going to walk in and then start telling everybody, look what she did, she put something in the oven to make it smoke because she's so poor, and she just wanted everyone to believe that she was baking bread. She knew HaKadosh Baruch Hu would come to her defense, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu would magically make that there's bread appearing in the oven, and therefore she was so confident in that, she went to go get this tool to get the bread off of the wall. Amra lei devisu. Chanina Bendosa's wife said to him, Ad emas nezil v'nitzdar kuli hai. Until how long? For how long are we going to have to put up with this poverty? Amrullah, he said to her, my navid, what would you like me to do? His wife says, Reb Chanina, what can we do? We're so poor, I just can't tolerate this anymore. For how long are we going to have to put up with this? So he says to her, what do you want me to do? So she said, please, just ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu that he should give us something. And he did. He said to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, please, my family is starving, my family is so hungry, please help us, get us something to eat. And immediately, Yatsa Kemin Pisas Yad, a hand showed up, V'yahavule Chadkara de Pesara de Dava. This hand, a leg, he saw in a dream asidi tzadikim de'achli apasar dedava, that many tzadikim are sitting there in the olam emes, and they're eating on a table of gold. The isli tas tlas kari. It has 3 legs. As the Mefarshim explained, the 3 legs represent Torah, Avoda, and Gemilas Chesed. The 3 things that keep the world standing, that's what their table in Olam Haba is made out of. However, the Ihu, it's changed in Masorah Shas. It says V'at in the Gemara, but it's really the Ihu. In other words, she was telling him, V'ihu ochelas apasora the treikare. In other words, he saw in a dream that his table was only had 2 legs on it. Now, the table with only 2 legs obviously can't stand. So he recognized that leg that had come to them was taken straight from his table in Olam Haba. In other words, yes, his tefillah was niskabel. Yes, he did get a leg full of gold, a leg that was made out of gold, which obviously had a tremendous amount of value to it, and he could have supported himself for quite some time with that. However, he saw that it was taken away from his Olam Haba. So again, it says here Amar Lei, but if you look in the Masorah Shas at the top of the page, it switches it to Amar La. So he said to his wife, Nichalach demechel achli, demechel akuli alma pesor d'mishalim, Do you want that everybody else should be eating on a pesor de mishlam, on a complete table, and we should be eating on a table that's missing? So Amrullah, she said back to him, "My navid, what should we do now?" So boy rachamim l'shkalinu. So what did he do? Chanina ben Dosa was mispali. He said, "HaKadosh Baruch Hu, yes, it's true. I asked you to give me something special. Yes, it's true that I asked you to support me and give me something that would be of high value. And yes, you listened to me. However, now I recognize that it was not worth it for me. So therefore, please, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, take it away from me." By rachmi v'shaklu, and indeed, he was mispal, and it was taken away. The Gemara says, Tana Gadol haya nesa achron min harishon. The second nace was bigger than the first one. Why? The Gamirif, we have learned the Me'av Yaev Mishkol Leishakli. Now, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is very giving. HaKadosh Baruch Hu constantly gives us. But for HaKadosh Baruch Hu to take returns, there's no return policy. You can't just show up with the receipt and just give it back. And the fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu went all the way, he gave him this golden leg of the table, and then he took it back from him. That was something which was a tremendous nace. We don't find that Shemayim takes things back up. So it was a tremendous nace that he was able to go ahead and return it and have it reserved for him for Olam Haba. The Gemara continues and says, another story about Ruchinu Medosa. Chad Bei Shimshi, there's one Erev Shabbos. So I thought it was interesting to point out, there really is no deeper Hamaskim for this, but if you look in the third wide line of Rashi, all the way at the end, it says, Kol Hecha Datani Bei Shimshi. Whenever we see in the Gemara the words Bei Shimshi, Hainu Erev Shabbos. This is Erev Shabbos. And what does Rashi write? Lo Shamati Hatam. I'm not sure what the reason for this is. So, first of all, for me, it's always encouraging when Rashi says Lo Shamati, because I'm not the only one who doesn't know. Rashi knows, obviously, he knows everything. But when Rashi feels it's important to write Lo Shamati, what's he teaching us? He's teaching us, don't be discouraged by not knowing something. Rashi says, I don't know the reason for this, but don't worry. Let's move on. But what is interesting is that for those Gemaras, I don't know if you all have this in your Gemara, but the Gemaras that have Mosef Rashi, in other words, what the editors of this Gemara did was they did searches on Rashis across all of Shas, and they pulled them together and they put them on the side of your page. So some Gemaras have something called Mosef Rashi, so I have it in my Gemara here, and they quote a Rashi in Meseches Ksubos, which gives us a reason why Kol Bei Shimshi is Erev Shabbos. And Rashi writes the reason, because everyone's busy getting ready for Shabbos, but ultimately the bottom line is Rashi does write the reason. So why is it that Rashi says he doesn't know the reason? So first of all, I don't know. Okay? But perhaps there might be a reason. There are those who say that the Rashi on Maseches Taanis is not Rashi. I don't know if that's come up at all over this Masechta. We generally refer to it as Rashi, but there is an opinion that Rashi over here is indeed the Rashi that we refer to as Rashi was not written by Rashi. It's another one of the Pirushim. And one of the reasons specifically is because of some of the things that are a little atypical in Rashi's normal lexicon that he uses when he writes on Shas. So I'm just throwing that out there. Either way, the Gemara says, Chad Bei Shimshi, one Erev Shabbos, Chazio Lebrate, Chanina Bedosa saw his daughter Devi Tzvi. She was very sad. So Amar Allah, he said to her, Biti, Lamaya Tzivas, why are you sad? Amrale, she said to him, Kli shel chometz nischalaf li b'kli shel shemen. I mistakenly, very famous story, I mistakenly mixed up a jug of chometz, of vinegar, with a jug of shemen. V'hidlakti mimenu ar l'Shabbos. And I lit from the vinegar for Shabbos. In other words, I lit my Shabbos candles from vinegar instead of oil. So Amar Allah, he said to his daughter, Biti, Mayach Paslach, what are you nervous about? Misha Amar L'Shemen v'yidlok, hu yomar l'chometz v'yidlok. Whoever HaKadosh Baruch Hu said that oil could light, the only reason why oil is able to fuel a fire is because HaKadosh Baruch Hu said it should fuel a fire. So, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will say that chometz will indeed be able to fuel the fire. The Gemara continues, Tana, we learned, Hayadolek b'holech kol hayom, that candle burnt all day, kol hayom kulo, ad shehiviu mimenu, until they lit from that candle, ar lahavdala, a fire like this, they can make havdalah. Very interesting story over here. If you look at the words carefully, something does not make sense about the story. All right, look what she says to him. She says to him, I mistakenly mixed up a jug of oil with a jug of vinegar. V'hidlakti mimenu arla Shabbos. And I lit my Shabbos candles from the vinegar. Now, if she lit her Shabbos candles, then what happened already? It was already working, right? V'hidlakti means I already lit it. It's in past tense. She already lit it. So what's her concern? What did she need Chanina Mendoza to tell her, to encourage her? It was already working. The nace was already there. So at first when I read this, I thought it must have been that she mixed the two together. In other words, she had some oil, and she poured in some vinegar, and then the vinegar stayed on the bottom. She was nervous. It's not going to stay until late in the evening when they need it for the Shabbos Suda. But then I saw in the Ben Yoyada, he actually raises a number of questions on this story. And what he says is that we have a total misunderstanding of what happened over here. Of course, she recognized that it worked, that she kindled this flame and it was fueling the fire. And as we said earlier, that this family was Mulumedes Benisim. Their whole life was a life of miracles. So what happened here? She lit her Shabbos candles and it worked. But she was upset. Why was she at Sivas? She was upset because she recognized that because of this mistake that she made, now she's relying on a nace. And as we learned previously, we don't want to rely on nisim. Nisim are not good for us. In other words, nisim come in only when there's no other choice. We have to rely on nisim, a nace comes out. But if she had not mixed up the chometz with the shemen, if she had actually gotten the right substance, she wouldn't have needed a nace. Furthermore, it says in the Gemara that they lit a fire from this candle and lit their Havdalah candle. Why couldn't they just use this? So again, why? Because they didn't want to rely on an ace. That's what it seems. But the Ben Yoyada explains that when he said to her, Misha Amar, L'shemen v'yadlik, whoever said that oil will work to kindle a fire, to fuel a fire, hu yomer l'chometz v'yidlok, what he was saying, he was giving her a very important lesson. He said to her, this does not fall into the category of a nace. Do you know why? A nace is when you take sand, and sand changes in its teva, and it turns into wheat. Here, Chanina Mendoza said to his daughter, he said, if you recognize the entire teva, everything that we have is a nace. There's no specific reason why oil should light, other than the fact that Kadosh Baruch Hu said it should work. There's no reason why oil should be any more of a fuel for a fire than vinegar, other than a Kadosh Baruch Hu saying that it should light the fire. So he said to his daughter, if you believe a Kadosh Baruch Hu runs the world, a Kadosh Baruch Hu gives the ability for shemen to fuel a fire, you could believe a Kadosh Baruch Hu could create such a teva with regard to chometz, to vinegar as well. So that's the way that the Ben Yoyada explains the story. He also explains the reason why it had to stay kindled all the way till after Shabbos. In other words, who needs this nace to go so far? Why can't it just stay lit the same amount of time that any other fire stays? So he says that specifically was an indication that HaKadosh Baruch Hu was doing it. In other words, his words are, he says, this is to show her from Shemayim, this will show that she does not lose any of her zechusim because of this. Why? If indeed it would cost her zechusim, why would a Kadosh Baruch Hu charge her zechusim for such a long time? Let her zechusim just fuel the fire as long as she needs it. Kadosh Baruch Hu took it all the way through the next day to show, don't worry, this one's on me. This is a freebie. Because this is not considered in the category of a nace. This is the teva that Kadosh Baruch Hu was showing her, that don't worry, because if it was a nace that took from your zechusim, I would not allow it to light any longer than it has to. So Kadosh Baruch Hu kept it on all day to show her that don't worry, this one is on me. All right, let's go further. Rabbi Chanina Mendoza had a number of goats. Amrulei kamafsidon. The neighbors came to him and said, Rabbi Chanina Mendoza, your goats are causing us damage. So Amar, ikamafsidon, if it's true that they're causing damage, nachlinu dubi, let bears eat them up. Rashi, for some reason, says that the dubi over here was the avim. It was wolves. But ultimately, they should be eaten up. V'ilai, and if it's not true, kol chada v'chada, each one, tesi le'orta duba b'karnayu. Each one should bring a bear on its horns. Le'orta, what happened? Aisi kol chada v'chada duba b'karnayu. They all came back holding a bear on their horns. In other words, they had won a fight with a bear. Okay? Havlachani shavivta de kabanya besa. He had this neighbor. In other words, we're talking about Nisan that happened. So Yochanan ben Dosa had this neighbor. The kabanya besa v'lamata kashuri. She was building a house, and the beams weren't long enough. They didn't go from one side of the house to the next. So what do you do when your beams are not the right size? You don't go to Home Depot and get new ones. Asya l'kamei. She came in front of Yochanan ben Dosa and she said, Amrale. She said to him, Banisi besi v'lamata kashurai. Trying to build a house, and the beams are not the right size. Apparently, there was no Home Depot. You couldn't just go to the store and switch them in for longer ones. So Amar La, he said to Mashemech, what's your name? Amar Le, she said to me, my name is Iku. All right, Amar Iku namtu kishurecha. She said the beams of Iku should actually be the right size. And the Gemara says, Tana higia achi yatsa ama. Amalakan. They grew, they extended, and they were an amma longer on each side. And some say that it wasn't that the actual beam grew, but extra pieces were added on because it was a beam that was made out of different pieces, so extra pieces were added on. So again, I was reading the Ben Yada, he says, why do you have to ask her name? So he points out, like we saw earlier in the Gemara from yesterday, they ask someone's name because you're mispelled for somebody to say their name. But he says when the person is standing in front of you, you don't have to say their name. Moshe Rabbeinu was mispalo. He said, Kelna Rifan Allah. He didn't have to say his sister's name because she was right there. So on yesterday's daf, when we saw that someone came to complain that his wife wasn't beautiful enough, so yes, what's her name? He has to be mispalo for her because she wasn't there. So here she was standing right there. So why does she have to say the name? So Ben Yada says because he had to see if built into her name was the right mazel, that she should be somebody who deserves this bracha. In other words, you could see in someone's name whether it's appropriate for them. Tanya, Plimo Omer, we learned, Plimo says, Anira isi oso abayis, I saw that house. Vevi korosav yotzis amalakan, and I actually saw that those beams were extended. V'amru li, and they said to me, Bayis says, Shakira, Yochanan ben Dosa tefilos. This is the house that Yochanan ben Dosa indeed built. He built the roof with his tefilos. The Gemara continues. Going back to the story of the Izim, that he had this whole challenge with his neighbors, where they claimed that they were causing damage, and he put this challenge with whether they'll get attacked by the bears, whether these goats will indeed attack the bears on their own. So the Gemara asks a simple question: Yochanan ben Dosa was poor; he had no money, right? He couldn't even afford bread. So where does he have all these goats from? So the Gemara says an amazing story, again a famous story. V'ha'ani heavy. He was very poor. V'od amar chachamim ein megad lebei medak b'Eretz Yisrael. You're not supposed to raise a small animal like a goat in Eretz Yisrael. So amar Pinchas, Maisa, the story was as follows. V'avar adam echad al pesach peso. A person passed by the house of Yochanan ben Dosa v'niach sham tarnagolim, and he left his chickens over there. His wife went outside and she found a number of chickens. The wife of Yochanan ben Dosa found those chickens. He told her, listen, they don't belong to you. You have a chiva of Hashavas Aveda to return them to the owner. So therefore, don't eat the eggs. Save them because the owner will come back and claim them. However, what happened? They multiplied. There were so many eggs and so many other chickens that were born. So it came to a point they couldn't handle all these chickens all over the place. So what do? So the halacha is, if someone is a shomer aveda, they're allowed to do what they need to preserve them or to take care of them. So he sold the actual chickens, and he bought goats. I guess they're easier to take care of, and he bought goats instead. The person who lost the chickens passed by. He said to his friend, I left my chickens over here. Shama, Rabbi Chanina heard this. He said to him, when you want to return a lost object, you have to indeed ensure that the person is the correct and proper owner. So he said, do you have any siman, any indication that could help you prove that these chickens were yours. Amar lo hain, yes, I do. Nasan lo simin, he gave a simin, but not all seizim, and he took all the goats. The hain, easy, the aisu dubi b'karnayu, these were those exact goats that brought back these bears on their horns. Rabbi Elazar ben Padas, the Chikle Milsa. And so now we're going on to the stories about Rabbi Elazar ben Padas. Rabbi Elazar ben Padas was also very poor. And so the Gemara says, the Chikle Milsa, he was very, very poor. Sorry, the Chikle Milsa Tuva. He was very, very poor, and Avad Milsa. He did something. What does it mean he did something? So Rashi tells us he went to let blood. Again, it was a very common medical procedure that was done in times of the Gemara. I believe, again, the assumption is that they assumed that there was some type of infection in the blood, and if they were to let their blood out, so then it would give the body the opportunity to replenish the blood, and then whatever infection they have, they would get better. Clearly, that's not modern medicine. But that's something that they would do. Now, the Gemara says, there was nothing for him to eat. On Shabbos, Rabbi Kalman Kiva taught us the daf, and we saw a story about a very pious uman, a surgeon or a doctor, and one of the things that he would do in his practice was he would give everyone to eat, because he understood that not everybody had food, and he wanted to make sure, because it was a very important thing, that after a person gives blood, have a cup of orange juice, have something to eat. So he would always give something to eat. But here, Rav Elazar ben Padas had nothing. So he let his blood out, he had nothing to eat. Shakal borrowed the tuma v'shadi b'pume. He took a piece of garlic and he put it in his mouth, and chalash libe v'nan. He ultimately passed out. He went to sleep. Azal Rabbanan l'shayu libe. The Rabbanan came to visit him. In other words, he was out. He was sleeping, so they came to visit him. Chaz yuhu dekabayach v'chayach. Sorry, dekabachi v'chayach. He was crying in his sleep, v'chayach, and he was smiling. V'nafak tzusisa denur me'apuse. A beam of light or spark of fire came out of his forehead. Kiyitar, when he eventually woke up, Armulei, my time kabachas v'chaychas. Why is it that you were crying and you were smiling? Amar lahu v'yasav ime kadosh baruch hu. Kadosh Baruch Hu was sitting with me. V'amri lei ad masai itztar b'hay alma. And I said to him, Ribono shel olam, for how long am I going to be pained in this world? V'amar li Elazar b'ni. He said to me, Elazar, my son, nich lecha da'ach bei alma miresha. Do you want me to start the world all over again? Efshar d'misyal d'b'shayt d'mizayni. Maybe you'll be born in better mazel. In other words, Kadosh Baruch Hu said to him, listen, what can I do for you? You were born under bad mazel. And therefore, if you want, I could push the reset button. We could start all over again. Maybe you'll be born again under better mazel. There's a whole discussion about mazel Yisrael, but I'm not going to go into it because, again, I don't want to run out of time when I finish the parak today. But again, there's a discussion as to whether or not we attribute mazel to Jewish people. So Amri likamei kulei hai ve'efshar. You're going to go through all of this to turn the whole world over, to put me back through the whole reset process, and then only maybe I'll be born under better mazel. Can we have a little bit more of a guarantee? So Amri Le said to him, D'chai tfei o d'chayana. He asked the Kadosh Baruch Hu, let's figure this one. Let's start thinking about this for a minute. Have I lived the majority of my life already? Or do I still have the majority of my life in front of me? In other words, if I'm just at the beginning now, maybe it's worth starting over because I have a long time to go. I don't know if I can handle being so poor for the rest of my life. But if I pass the halfway mark, so then if I did it up until now, I can make it till the end. So Amar Le D'chayis. You've lived most of your life. So Amar Le Kameim Kain Lo Be'ina. If that's the case, let's not do this whole thing. I'll handle it. Amar Le B'hai Igra D'Amrit Lo Be'ina Yavel L'chol Alma. In the schar that you said that you don't want to start all over again, I'll give you into your world, Dasi Tleser Narvasa Demishka the Parsimon Dechayin. And Kaparta Vidiglas de Angus Behu. In other words, you say he's going to give him this persimmon oil, and you'll be able to benefit from him. So Amar, was it Narvas de Mishka Parsim de Chayin Kaparta Vidiglas de Angus Behu? In other words, you'll be able to have pleasure from this, I guess, persimmon type of oil. I don't know exactly what it is. So Amri L'kamei, it said, Hai V'sulei, that's it. That's all I get. So Amar Le U'lechavrach Ma'yavina, can I take everything from everybody else and give it to you? Amar Le V'ana Mikarva de Lesbe Be'ina. Take it from somebody who doesn't have. In other words, talking to your HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you can figure this one out. Mechayim be'askulta apusai. So at that point in time, Rashi says, Hainu tsusisa denafik minei, that was the spark that went out of him. Shemadbik etzbat zrada im agudo umakbit siparnal etzba. Gave him a flick, what sounded like a flick. He flicked his finger and hit him on the forehead. And for Amarli, he said, Alazar brei giri bach. In other words, you're very, very sharp. He said to him, you're very, very sharp. You've got arrows coming out of you. So you flicked him on the forehead. That was the point in time when a spark was visible that came out of his head. We're going back to the sugya of declaring a fast day because of a lack of rain. The Gemara says, he declared a fast day and it did not rain. They said to him, how come it's not working for you? Bishua ben Levi was able to do it and it rained. What can I tell you? He's Bishua ben Levi. I'm somebody else. Maybe you should all get together and you should daven together, put your heads together, and after the Tavrit Tzibura libayu v'asi. Maybe if we get the whole tzibur together, then it will rain. Bon rachamei v'asi mitra. They were mispalel, but it didn't rain. Amar lahu nichalachu shiyavu matar b'shvilenu. He asked everybody, do we all have the askama of everybody? Does everybody agree that it should rain? Amru le, they said to him, Hain, yes. Amar rakia, they said, the heavens. He called up to the heavens and they say, Rakia, kasi panecha. Cover your face. What does that mean? You should cover your face with clouds. However, lo ichsi, the clouds did not come. Amar kama azin pnei Rakia. How brazen is the face of Rakia that it's now listening to us. Ichsi va'asa mitra. Indeed, at that point in time, it covered itself with clouds and it rained. Levi gazar tanisa v'lo asa mitra. Levi instituted, he declared a fast day, but indeed, v'lo asa mitra did not rain. Amar lefan of Rebbeinu Shalom, he said to Rebbeinu Shalom, Alisa v'yoshavte b'marom v'einat t'merachim al banecha. It's hard to read these words. It's hard even to translate them. But ultimately, he said, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you're sitting there on your high throne. You're sitting there up there in Shemayim. You don't recognize what's going on over here with us, with Klal Yisrael, v'einat t'merachim al banecha. You're not having rachmanos on your children who are living down here on this world who need the rain. Asra mitra, indeed. He spoke that way, and it rained. However, the Gemara says ve'itla, and he became a cripple. When a person speaks like that to Kodesh Baruch Hu, Amr Belazar says, "Olam al yatiach adam dvarim klapi ma'ala." Person should not speak with such harsh words to the Rebbeinu Shalom Shrei Adam Gadol yatiach dvarim klapi ma'ala. Levi indeed spoke that way. Ve'itla became a cripple. Umanu Levi, and it was Levi. In other words, yes, it's important that we spell to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and yes, it's important we let HaKadosh Baruch Hu know what our feelings are and talk to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but a person has to be careful speaking to HaKadosh Baruch Hu not to speak in a brazen way. The Gemara says, hold on a second, is that true that speaking like that caused him to become crippled? We know there was a story when Levi did some type of acrobatic move. Rashi says, this kida was noetz shnei godlov ba'aretz. He stuck his two thumbs into the ground. V'shochan, he bows down. V'noshek esaritzba, and he kissed the floor. In other words, it was some type of move that he did. And he showed it to Rebbe, and because of that, in other words, because of this acrobatic move that he did, he became crippled. In other words, why are you telling me it's because of this thing that he said to Kodesh Baruch Hu? We know what happened. We were there. He was trying to perform some type of acrobatic move, and he got hurt. So the Gemara says, Hava Hagarmale. It was a combination of both. Because he spoke like that, that's why he became crippled when he did this movement. He heard the clouds talking to each other, and they were saying, let's go dump some water down. Let's bring some water to Amanu Mayav. Amr lafan of Rebbeinu Shleilam, Kishin Nesata Torah Lamecha Lamchi Yisrael Chazarta Kol Umos Olam V'Kibluah. When you gave the Torah to all of Klal Yisrael, when you gave the Torah to the Yidden, what did you do? Before you went around and asked all the nations of the world, do you want it? And they said no. Now you're giving the other nations rain and not Klal Yisrael. So Shadu Hacha, bring it here. And Shadu Aduch Tayu. And ultimately, yes, it did rain on Eretz Yisrael. Why does it say in the pasuk, Tzadik katamar yifrach ke'eretz b'avanim yiskeh? Why does it say that Tzadik will sprout like a tamar, like a date tree, and ke'erez, like a cedar, balvan and yiska will stand tall like a cedar tree. So the Gemara says, imnemar tamar, in other words, why do you have to compare Klal Yisrael both to a tamar and to an erez? Gemara says, imnemar tamar, loma nema erez. Imnemar erez, loma nema tamar. Why do you have to have both comparisons? The Gemara says, ilu nemar tamar, v'lo nemar erez. If it would only say tamar, a date tree, palm tree, v'lo nemar erez, it would not say a cedar tree. Hayisi omer mat tamar, ein gizom achlef, just like a palm tree. If you cut it down, ein gizom achlef, it's not going to grow back. Afsad chas v'shalom, ein gizom achlef. A person might come to say that a Talmud Chacham does not come back with Techias HaMesim, as Rashi explains. So Lekach Nemer Erez, that's why it says Erez, because an Erez will grow back if you cut it. Now you might ask me a couple blot earlier, we learned that we compared the bracha of Bilam when he ultimately blessed Klal Yisrael, it should be like an Erez, and we said that that's not even similar to the klal we had when the Klal Yisrael should be like reeds, because reeds cut them down, it's gizu machlef, but erez is not gizu machlef. In other words, we saw just a couple pages earlier, the erez does not grow back. So the Gemara is going to address that in just a minute. So ilu nemar erez, if we just say a cedar tree, lo nemar tamar would not say a palm tree. Hisiyomer would say ma erez enos aperos, afsad chas shalom enos aperos. A person might say just like an erez, a cedar tree does not have fruits, then a tzaddik also maybe does not get any schar in olam haba. So then lekach nemar tamar, that's why he compares tzaddik to a tamar, to a palm tree, because that does give out fruit. So v'nemar erez, and it also says erez. The erez gizo machlef. The Gemara asked the question we asked before: is it true that an erez it does grow back if you cut it down? Vatanya, have we not learned in the Brayso, alokach ila mechaver, a person who buys a tree from his friend, lakutz migabayu min hakarka tefach lekotses. He has to make sure that when he cuts it down, he buys the tree, you have to cut it a tefach off the ground. It's like this, it will grow back. Besidan hashikma, neshikma tree, shnei tefachim. Besulas hashikma, if the person is buying a besulas hashikma, shlosha tefachim, it needs to be 3 tefachim. All these are to ensure that it will grow back. Bekanim, gefanim, and a pekakum ulamaila, from where the wood knots and higher. B'dekalim uba'arazim, when it comes to dekalim and arazim cedar trees, chofer lamata umashrish lafisha en gizom achlef. You have to go all the way down to the roots because it does not grow back. So Gemara says hachamayskinon b'shar mini arazim. So Gemara says ultimately there are different types of arazim. Some grow back, some don't grow back. When the pasuk is referring to arazim, it's referring to the arazim that do grow back. The Rabbi Baravuna, like we learned from Rabbi Baravuna, Dam Rabbi Baravuna, Asar mini arazim here. There are 10 different types of arazim. Shenemar etein midbar erez shita v'hadas. Gemara continues. He instituted 13 fasts because it wasn't raining. However, it didn't work. Still didn't rain. After the last fast, everyone started just to leave. You're all leaving. You're all going home. Do you prepare graves for yourself? In other words, there's no food because it's not raining. Where are you going? So go, everyone started crying. In other words, he said something which really pierced their hearts. He really got them to think that we're in a dire situation. What did they do? They started crying. The yardu geshamim, and it started to rain. So here we see the concept that shari demaos lo ninalu, even when tefilos are not neskabel, tears are neskabel. Shuv ma'aser Rebbe Lezer. There's another story with Rebbe Lezer. Sh'yar lefnei ateva, he went to be mispalel before the Amud. The Amar Esrim the Arba brachos lonen. He said 24 brachos. He was not answered. Yarad Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva went down after him. The Amar Avinu Malkeinu in Lanu Melech Elata. That's all he said. He said Avinu Malkeinu in Lanu Melech Elata. Avinu Malkeinu Laman Charachim Aleinu. Please have rachmanos because of for your sake. Have rachmanos on us. The yardu geshamim, and it started to rain. Having meranani rabbanon. Rabbanon were dancing. And Yatsa Baskol came out. The Amra, and it said lo b'pnei shezagadol, means that not because one of these is bigger than the other ones. In other words, we see very clearly that Rebbe Lezer, he tried. He spelled 24 brachos, and it still didn't work. And then we have the story with Rabbi Akiva, that he just said 2 short tefilos and he was answered. So a Paschal came out and said, it's not that Rabbi Akiva is any bigger than him. Elish is that Mavral Midosav, is there any Mavral Midosav? Rabbi Akiva is Mavral Midosav. Again, we don't have time to talk about what this means, but there was a certain Maila. Didn't necessarily make him better, but there was a certain Maila in the way that he decided to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu that made it easier for his tefilos with regard to this particular story to be neskabel, to be accepted. At what point in time did they stop fasting? Gemara says, like the size of the plow. Those are the words of Rameir. It depends. If it's dry, so then it has to penetrate the ground, the tefach. The beinin is if it's like kind of not very damp, but it's not totally bone dry, tochaim, 2 tefachim. Ba'avuda, if it's already worked ground, it's completely plowed, so it's very soft, 3 tefachim has to go further. 3 tefachim. Tanya, we learned in the Brayso, B'Shimon Elazar Omer, Ein lecha tefach mil mailash, ein tehom yotze l'kras 3 tefachim. We don't have, in other words, the way it works is, when 1 tefach of rain comes down, the tehom, the water from underneath the earth, comes up 3 tefachim. In other words, it works in both directions. When it rains, the triple the amount of rain that comes from Shemayim comes from the tehom from underneath. Tanya tefachim, have we not learned that it comes up 2 tefachim, not 3 tefachim? So Gemara says, lo kasha, there's no kasha kam ba'avuda, kam b'she'en ba'avuda, depends how soft the ground is, to let you know how far it's going to go. Amar Rabbi Elazar, shemenasken samayim, the chag, when they do the nisa chamayim, they pour the water on the mizbeach, on sukkahs, tehom momer lechavero, the tehom, the depth, says to its friend, eva meimecha, sprout forward your water. Kol shnei reim ani shomea. I hear the voice of 2 friends. Shenemar tahom al tahom kore. The tahom, the depth, calls to the depth. The kol tzin arecha. The kor the kol tzin arecha. They call to each other by the sound of your pipes. Amar Rabba lididi chazili. I saw Hai Ridya. This is the malach that is, the Rashi says, it's the malach hamamun al geshamim. That was his name. He saw this malach whose job was to oversee the rain. And Dami Leigla looked like a calf. Upirsa sif vase, it opened up its lips. The kaima be tahoma tatala tahoma ilah, was standing between the upper waters, or the upper tahom and the lower tahom, and l'tahuma ilah, to the higher one. Amarle chashar mimecha, pour out your water, l'tahuma tata, to the depth. Amarle eva mimecha, sprout out your water. Shnemer hanitzanim nirub aretz. Hayu misanin. We have to finish the parak. Hayu misanin. They were fasting. V'yardu geshamim, and it started to rain. So the Mishnah discussed when they could stop the fast. So the Gemara says, if they didn't start fasting yet, in other words, before Hanetzachama, then they can just cancel the fast. The Gemara brings 3 different opinions. They were fasting and rain started coming down. If it's before Netzachama, then they don't have to finish the fast because the fast didn't start yet. If they already passed the threshold of Netzachama, they have to finish it. Before Chatzos, we have more time today, right? It's not Hanukkah anymore. Let's go back. Did I start the daf too early? Should we start over again? I'm busy rushing through this. I'm on the Hanukkah schedule. I'm just thinking here now. 6:30. We can't start chakras yet. I'm sorry. Okay, let's slow down. So Tana Rabbanan. The Rabbanan learned. We have this discussion here about at what point in time the fast is chal on them. We can explain this a little bit better. At what point in time do we say that the fast has started, and then once you start, you can't stop anymore? That was a discussion in the Mishnah. So the one opinion was Netzachama, the other one was Chatzos. So let's start again from the 2 deaths. Tana Rabbanan. Hayu misanin, they were fasting, v'yardu lehem geshamim, and rain started falling. Kodim hanatzachama, if it started raining before sunrise, lo yashlimu, they don't have to finish the fast. L'achar hanatzachama, after hanatzachama yashlimu, then they indeed have to finish the fast. Divrei Rebbe Meir, those are the words of Rebbe Meir. Behuda Omer, Behuda says, Kodim chatzos, if they started the fast before chatzos, lo yashlimu, then they don't have to fast. They don't have to finish the fast. But l'achar chatzos, which is half of the day, midday, then yashlimu, then indeed they have to finish the fast. B'yosi Omer, B'yosi says, Kodim teshos, he throws in another opinion over here, which was, before 9 hours into the day, lo yashlimu, they don't have to start. L'achar teshos, after 9 hours, yashlimu, then they have to finish the fast. Why? Shekei matzinu ba'achav, we find by Achav Melech Yisrael, Shehisana mitesha shos, so the Mali he started his fast at 9 hours into the day and on. In other words, the point is we're trying to figure out at what point in the day, when a person is fasting, is it considered that they've done something out of the ordinary, which indicates that the fast has started. So Hanetzach Chama clearly is when the day starts. Most people don't eat breakfast at Netzach Chama. Even when Netzach Chama, when Hanetzach Chama is quite early, like 7:30, people usually eat breakfast a little bit later than that. But the first opinion is, but that's when the day starts. The second opinion is chatzos, because a real full meal doesn't happen till midday. When we bring in the opinion of 9 hours, because kings, as Rashi tells us, if you see in Rashi, Shekain Matzinu, in the middle of Rashi says, Sha'ad Gimel Shos Hein Yishenu Mitoseim, V'Shom Shisha Shos Vochlin. Kings have an opportunity to sleep late. We don't know what that means over here, to sleep late. But kings, they have plenty of time, and they have plenty of people doing things for them, so therefore they could sleep late. So they don't even have their meal until 9 hours into the day, because they have to get up, they have to take a shower, they have to read the newspaper, they have to watch the news. So they don't actually eat their meal until later into the day. So the point at which, when a person fasts past then, it's considered as if the fast day has started, that is 9 hours into the day. So we have three different opinions as to when, if it starts raining, we can say the fast has not yet started, and therefore you're potter from fasting. And we prove this, that Achav fasted, Shenemar, Hariisa, Kinichna Achav. Did you see that Achav ultimately became humble? Rabbi Yehuda Nasiya, Gazar Tanisa, Rabbi Yehuda Nasiya, he instituted a fast, he declared a fast day. And it started raining after Hanetzach Chama. And Savar la'ashlu minu, he thought that indeed they should finish the fast. Amar le Rabbi Ami kodem chatzos, v'achar chatzos sheninu. Why are you telling us we have to fast? It's raining before chatzos. So if it's raining before chatzos and we're not fasting past chatzos, then we really have not indicated that we're fasting yet. Shmuel HaKatan, and therefore clearly we see that they paskined that the point in time is going to be chatzos. Shmuel HaKatan Gazar Tanis Yardul Lahem Gesham. Shmuel HaKatan instituted a fast day. Yardul Lahem Gesham, and it started raining. Kodem Hanetzach Chama, before Hanetzach Chama. Kesvurin Ha'am Lomer Shvacha Shal Tzibor. The nation started thinking this must be a real indication that we're special people. In other words, we institute a fast day, we're ready to fast, they get out there, they're ready to go daven, say slichos, and on their way to shul, it starts raining. So they said it must be, we're very special. Amar lahem, amshu lechem mashal. Don't get so excited about yourself. Let me give you a parable, a metaphor for this. What's this similar to? Le'evet shemavakish prasmi rabo. A servant asks his master to give him something. Amar lahem, and he says to them, Tenulo ve'eshma kolo. Sorry, Tenulo ve'al eshma kolo. The king says to his servants, do me a favor, I don't want this guy pestering me. Just give it to him. Just give it to him. And that's what he said. It's not a good sign that we didn't even get to fast yet. HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us rain. Had HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted our tefilos, he would have at least listened to us and given us time to get our tefilos in. It's not a good thing that we didn't even get a chance to fast and to be mispal. Shuv Amar Shmuel Katan Gazar Tanisa. Sorry, Shuv Shmuel Katan Gazar Tanisa. Another time, there was a lack of rain, and Shmuel Katan declared a fast day. The Yardulem Geshamon LaAchar Shkia Sachama. It took the entire day, all the way till after sunset, for rain to come. Kisvur Ma'am Lomar. After they heard the previous thing that Shmuel Katan said, they said, we must have made it. Took us a whole day. HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted our tefilos all day, so therefore it must, because Vurim Ha'am Lomar Shevachal Shatziborhu. This is indeed an indication of praise to the tzibor. Amar Lahem Shmuel. Shmuel said, no. Lo Shvach Shatziborhu. That's not an indication of praise. Ella Amshlecha Mashal. I'm going to give you a mashal, give you a metaphor. What's similar to Le'evet Shemavakish Prasmi Rabo. A servant asks for a gift from his master. V'amar Lahem, and he says to them, Hamtinuli achi smakek v'yitzdar. He says, let me hear him. Let me see how much pain he's in. In other words, Kadosh Baruch Hu let us go all the way through the day. Do you hear how much pain we are in? How many tefilos we're bestowing before him? In other words, all this, we have to go through so much pain. It's similar to a master who makes his servant cry out and cry out and cry out until he finally gives it. And afterwards give it to him. So the Gemara says, which one is it? So which one is it? If you get answered right away, it's no good. You get answered late, it's no good. So the Gemara says, what indeed would be an indication that it's a shvach of the tzibur? Gemara says, Amar Mashiv Ruach v'Nashiv Zika, Amar Marageshin v'Asumitra. Person's mispalel and the tefilos is niskabel. In other words, not before you're mispalel and not after hours and hours and hours and hours of supplications. After a person's mispalel, Kadosh Baruch Hu hears the tefilah and answers. That would be a shvach of the tzibur. So had they come to shul, had they started their fast, and had they started davening, and after they davened, their tefilos would have been answered. That would have been an indication that HaKadosh Baruch Hu indeed is showing the shvach of Klal Yisrael. The Gemara says, "Ma'aseh v'gazor Tanisa belud." Just going back to the Mishnah, so what happened over here was they instituted a fast day in Lud, and it started raining, and they told everybody to go home and to come back to say Hallel. So the Gemara says, "V'nei Hallel meikar." Why do you send everybody home and then tell them to come back for Hallel? Amar Abaye v'Rava Amar Tarvayu. Abaye and Rava said the reason is V'she'ein Omer Hallel Ela Anefesh Seveya V'Keres Maleya. You can't say Hallel when you're starving. In other words, it's not the appropriate time to say Hallel on Matzah Tisha B'Av. That's just not the right time to say Hallel. You have to be comfortable. You have to be satiated. You have to feel good about yourself. That's when you say Hallel. Now Rashi says over here, because within Hallel it says nosin lechem chol basar, so therefore you can't be hungry. Now, as you're thinking, we just said Hallel the whole week, and you're wondering which part of Hallel did I miss that says nosin lechem chol basar. So clearly this is part of a Hallel Hagadol, which included all those Hodul Hashem Kitov Kilam Chastos, which at the end says Nosin Lechem Chol Basar Kilam Chasto. So that was included in their Hallel. Eini, Gemara says this is not true. But Rav Papa Ikla B'nei Knishta. Rav Papa came to the Beit Knishta de Abi Gover of Abi Gover, which is the Rashi says Abi Gover is Shem Adam Makom. It's a place. It's a noun. In other words, it's either a person or it's a place. He came to the base medrash, the Gazar Taanis, and he declared a fast day, V'yardulam Geshamim, and started raining in the middle of the fast day. Ad Chatzos, before Chatzos, V'amar Hallel, and they said Hallel right then. V'yachar kach achal v'shasu. In that case, they did not eat until after they said Hallel. Gemara says, Shani b'nei Mechuzah, the b'nei Mechuzah, people of that town are different. Why? The Shchichi b'ushtikras, because they like to drink a lot. So he was nervous that if he sent them home to eat and drink first, they'd come back drunk. And what kind of Hallel is it to say when you're drunk? And therefore, he told them, you guys are the exception. You say Hallel first, then you go home and eat. Hadron alach seder Taanis elu. We have Baruch Shem finished this parak. Rabbi Said, it's been a tremendous suchos, a tremendous pleasure to spend the last 9 or 10 days learning together with you. We finished the whole parak. And really, it's been a tremendous chus to spend my mornings with you. It's a beautiful thing. It's a tremendous chus. I thank you for giving me the opportunity to be here. Mitzvah Shem tomorrow, Rabbi Slover will be back. Have a wonderful day and a wonderful Chodesh.